is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy
Hi there folks, I wanted to do a fairly quick video about gender equality and add my 2 cents as to where I think we are at. I do hope that this video can spark some rational and civilized dialogue. For this video I will focus specifically on the West or Western culture, for example the United States, Canada, England, etc., and on cisgendered men and women. For those of you who are not familiar with the term cisgendered, it is used to identify men and women who are comfortable and identify with the gender that they were assigned with at birth. My focus for this particular video is so narrow, not because I think that trans people or people living in other cultures are not important, but because I think that the issues that people in the trans community and people living in non-Western cultures face are a lot more complicated. I do personally identify as a feminist, and I believe in gender equality for everyone. I think that the way that this is achieved is not by knocking down the so-called oppressor, but by elevating the oppressed up. Okay, so where are we at? Personally, I think that both women and men face issues that are generally specific to gender or sex. There are at least a few for both men and women, but the ones that seem to most obvious to me surround sexual violence. While there are adult men who face sexual violence, I think that most would agree that by and large that this is an issue that affects mostly women and girls. A lot has been done to curb this, such as legally acknowledging that wives can be raped by their husbands, implementing resources for women and girls who have experienced sexual violence, and fairly widespread public education. One of the barriers I see to overcoming sexual violence against women and girls is victim blaming. The reality is that girls and women have to always be vigilant. I think that most of us have that threat breathing down our necks all the time. We have to monitor what we wear, how we act, who we are with, where we go, and when. To me, these are things that most men get to take for granted. I, as a woman, have less freedom than a man in our society, and I personally think that this is just as bad as being raped, and yes, I have experienced sexual violence personally. We should be just as safe as men and have as much freedom as men. And personally, I don't think that this will happen until the victim blaming stops and until every shred of onus is laid where it belongs, and that is at the feet of the rapist. For men and older boys who face sexual violence, there is a whole host of issues that are not usually something that women and girls need to worry about. I think that there is a whole added layer of shame for boys and men who are victims of sexual violence, whether the criminal violating them is female or male. I obviously can speak very little of what this is like, as I am not a man, but I do have a couple of men that I love dearly in my life who have unfortunately had to live with this. It makes me sad to know that these men face ridicule because of sexual violence that they have faced, and for the most part are not taken seriously. I do think that this is a systemic issue. One only needs to look at the lack of resources and education surrounding the topic to see what I mean. I, as a woman who have faced sexual violence, have quite a few places that I can turn to for help. What do men have? Where can they go? In some cases, they have very little. In other cases, there is nowhere for them to go. Just like the violence women and girls face, the sexual and overall violence that men and boys experience is just as serious. Their stories and pain are just as real. Well, that's all I have to say at this point, I guess. Please feel free to share your own thoughts either in the comments, video responses, or in a private message. Thanks for watching. Slancha.